Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank the SSA for inviting me here. I would like to thank August and Liz for all the work they put into this. I do have to mention, though, that August demonstrated that he is truly an evil atheist. And he did this yesterday, and he probably didn't even notice. But you may recall when he was talking yesterday, he said everybody was on a 20-minute time limit except for me. And then right after that, he showed you the page in the book where you get to evaluate the speakers. And I realized if I go for an hour, I'm going to be the boring old fart. Let everybody out. So it's a very subtle thing he has done here. So of course, I went back to my room last night and I stripped out a bunch of things from my talk. So I hope I will not go for an hour, but I have been known to just get on a roll. And you're allowed to yell at me to sit down and shut up. It's okay. Okay, so I also have to mention who I am, because Phil always does such a lousy job of introduction. And I have a portrait of myself that I found on the web a while back, and I have to show you this because you've all heard of the Four Horsemen, right? I'm number 5. It's actually kind of creepy. I read this comic regularly, and Mark Tutuli, I think, has a time machine going back to about 1965, and he is recording my daily life on the strip. Yes, I was a weird little kid, and somewhat morbid, and some other interesting things. But yeah, this is me. I'm the little guy trailing behind, having a grand time, and I'm having a grand time here this weekend too. I've been learning a lot. I've been learning some amazing things. So, also last night, you heard Sean and Jesse talk. They gave a very good talk. And the only thing that marred their talk was they threw out some really long words that I did not know. And I had to look them up. This is one of them. I said, what is this thing? And of course, then you go through this, and I had to look up all these other words. Tact? What? So I'm going to warn you that what I'm talking about tonight is not this strange diplomacy word. This is not what I do. But at the same time, I have to acknowledge that it is a good thing that there are people who should be exercising diplomacy, and I'm glad they are, because they cover some of my sins. What I am is, I'm sort of the hitman around here, and what I do is make noise and stir things up. So that's the title of my talk really, is Counting Coup, which I'm sure many of you have heard of this phrase, right? Do you know what it means? Yeah, you know what this is? This is a coup stick. And it's a noble tradition that what the Indians did. What they would do is that when they're facing an enemy, they would take this stick, which is really harmless. It's just a pretty stick with feathers on it. And they would go running up, whooping and yelling, and they'd smack the enemy in the face or wherever with this stick and yell that he counted coup. And it was considered a great honor to be so brave as to do something so fierce. That's the romantic version, of course. Often what they would do is they would first stick a lance in the guy and then hit him, or sometimes they'd hit him first and then they'd put a tomahawk in his skull or something. But the principle is there, that what you're trying to do is you are trying to go up against your enemy and demonstrate your bravery, your ferocity, not your diplomacy. This is to show that you have a position of strength that you're operating from. So that's what I'm talking about today, is one of the roles of some of us atheists, and I hope more and more of us, is to get out there and make ourselves known, to make some noise, to make the world aware of us, and make a real mess for the diplomats like Sean to come along and clean up afterwards. And of course, the nice thing about that is that when Sean comes along and cleans up the mess, Sean and Jesse look like the good guys. So we have our role in the atheist ecosystem. There are a few things I want to talk about how we do this, though, and there are some rules about how you do it. As I mentioned, the Sioux would do things like stick their enemy with a lance. And no, we don't do that. We do not believe in real violence. This is a war of words. This is a war of rhetoric. This is where we talk and talk and talk and talk. Like I said, you can tell me to shut up at some point here. Not just yet, but in a little while. And we've got some rules of engagement here. And those of you who went to the Creation Museum, well, I'm impressed with so many of you. You know that when I wrote this up, I laid down some simple rules there. And one of the rules was, don't get angry, have a good time and laugh. So this is an overriding rule for our behavior here, is that we have an image, and we have to work a little bit against it. Dan mentioned this. You know, what was his image that, you know, the big brain, very logical, very serious fellow who gets up there, that's your common atheist. I call it the Spark Stereotype, that you're going to be very cerebral and very serious and very sober about everything, and you're not going to respect human emotions and things like that. Of course, all of you who know Star Trek and watch it know that the interesting thing about Spock is not when he's really logical, but when he starts to break down at the edges and you see the humanity shining through. Same thing for us. That for us, what's important is things like demonstrating humor. Mockery is a great thing. This is really counting coup, is when you can make the enemy look ridiculous. So this is what you aspire to, not their destruction, not necessarily total humiliation or abject defeat, but make them look silly, and you've won. So that's always more effective than anger. And also, what's important is personality. Spock had a great personality, actually. Well, he's a very interesting person to watch on the screen. And it's the same for many of us, that what we have to do is we have to let our personalities shine through when we're interacting with other people. Don't be dry, don't be humorless, don't be entirely sober. Especially tonight, I hear there's going to be less than usual sobriety. Yeah. Have a good time. You know, in my own case, I let my own personality shine through, and you know, it's these little obsessions of mine. I'm always surprised when I meet strange people and they know so much about me. And there's always the tentacle jokes. There's always the squid jokes. And there's always this business, you know, I'm very irreverent about religion. Except this one. This one you cannot laugh at. Okay, so make fun of things. Have fun. Let it all hang out. Be yourself. The other thing is a rule that we have had drilled into us, an observation I'm sure you've all made. You've all followed the atheist bus campaigns, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. I have to confess that I am not the prophet PZ, because when these started up and people started writing me and said, oh, you gotta mention this great campaign, this bus campaign, and I read these things and I said, what? Huh? This doesn't sound very interesting. Nobody cares about buses. How uninteresting. And you know, I threw up a few token posts about this. You know, oh, they're running buses in Britain. Here's a picture. Like there's the bus picture up there. And also, you know, I saw these signs they're putting up. You know, there's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life. That's not very militant. Why believe in a God? Just be good for goodness sake. Well, what happened to the evil atheist image? Come on, this is ruining everything. And then don't believe in God, you're not alone. That doesn't even assert anything. And so I thought this was pretty boring stuff, and I could easily come up with a much more ferocious. But they weren't listening to me. But the thing we discovered, and that we have discovered, is you cannot overestimate the public sensitivity to questioning religion. These are incredibly innocuous statements. These are just common assertions of our existence. And they're saying nice things like we can be good, right? Mostly. So this is not so horrible. But as you all know, for instance, just recently the Iowa bus campaign got shut down very abruptly. Although I'm pleased to tell you now that has been rescinded, and starting next week they will be running those bus ads again. So we're getting there. But just the fact that people could get upset about that bottom sign is sort of shocking. So yeah, we can't overestimate this. We can do the most trivial stuff and get people upset with us, isn't that wonderful? We can also do things like this, which now that I see what inflames people, this was overkill. This was the cracker episode you may have heard of, and it's not very impressive, is it? That circular thing in the middle, that's a communion wafer, and there's a nail through it. And as I mentioned when I wrote this up, I said, this is really stupid and trivial. It's just a cracker, and I just follow the traditional desecration technique of sticking a nail through it. I said, oh, well, sure, we'll throw in the Koran and the God delusion at the same time and impale those and throw those in garbage and drape them with banana peels and coffee grains. And this is not a big deal, I said. Some of you may have followed this little event, and it was a very big deal to a lot of people. It blew up huge. There were several months there where I was getting several thousand emails a day just from outraged Catholics screaming at me at the evil I had perpetrated. My university suffered quite a bit. The administration actually had to hire a full-time temporary staff member to handle the mail. Just coming in every day and getting this stack, and they were very diligent about this and taking it seriously, and they would open it and read each one. And I wonder if they gave hazard pay to this poor student they hired to do this. But anyway, yeah, and I was getting all this mail. I still get email, regular mail about this. I get all kinds of little old ladies writing to me, telling me what evil things I've done, which makes me feel kind of good. But now I realize, I didn't have to do this. All I had to do was put up that original post where I said, "Oh, it's just a cracker," and it would have done just as much because they're so hypersensitive about this sort of thing. So this is a couple lessons I've given you so far. So have a good time, be humorous, be a little bit outrageous, but you don't have to be very outrageous to be successful at this business. The other message I want to give to you is this one, and that is, yes, you should be a scientist. Now, this picture is classic. This is beautiful. This is really being a scientist. Any of you who follow this event, this was streamed over the internet some months ago. This is the Te Papa Museum in New Zealand, and they are dissecting a colossal squid, which they thawed out in this big tank. And it was great fun watching them get in there and rip this thing apart. You will notice white lab coats, classic. You will also notice that except for this one woman here, nobody's wearing gloves, which I think is just so cool. I've dissected lots of squid, but they're little squid, but I love the squishy feeling. And here you are, this giant, this colossal, rotting squid. And also, look at these people's faces. They are rapt. This is wonderful stuff. People enjoy this. This is part of the atheist ethos, I think, is that we are curious about the natural world. We are interested in the material universe around us. We're interested in exploring it. And I'm saying, you've got to be a scientist, but what do I mean by being a scientist? Because many of you are sitting here saying, oh, you just left me out because I do not have a PhD in rockets or neuroscience or squid or anything. And maybe you don't even have a PhD, and that's okay, because what is a scientist? A scientist is somebody who observes, measures, analyzes, quantifies, compares, who is curious, asks questions, makes hypotheses. Now, is anybody here a political science major? Whoa, all right. Future senators. If you're a political science major, how many of those things do you not do? Seriously, you all do this. My oldest son is a political science major. Well, he's a graduate now. And this is what he does. He does polls, he does surveys, he does all kinds of tests. He evaluates things, he asks questions, he asks what kinds of issues are important to people. He is measuring things. He is doing science. It's called political science, right? Okay, how many of you are English majors? Oh, there's a few of you even. Good, yeah. My second son is an English major. And it's the same thing. He's really into Southern literature, so he's into Faulkner. What do you think he does? Do you think he goes and sits down and says, well, here's this book, I will wave my hands over it and pray, and I will understand the mind of Faulkner? No, he does a scientific thing. He analyzes, he compares, he reads the thing. He's looking at this. He's looking for evidence of the mind of Faulkner expressed in the words he used in this book. He looks at biographies, he compares histories. He's doing science as an English major. Okay, my daughter is a budding computational linguist. I bet you there aren't very many here. Anyone? Anyone? Oh, well, okay. Anyway, that's also science. She's doing the same thing. She's off in Arizona right now. She's doing all these very computer-based sorts of things, looking at databases and analyzing frequencies of various stuff. And I can't understand what she's talking about anymore. That happens to all of our kids. They grow beyond us. So, I don't care what you do. You could pump gas for a living. I don't care. You can be a scientist, because what you're doing is applying your understanding of the material world to what you do for a living. You could be, like me, a parent, and you could raise kids. And what you're doing is, you're not imagining or hallucinating a spirit in these kids. What you're doing is you're looking at their behavior, and you're asking what they want. You're trying to figure out how to make their life the best it can be. It's all being a scientist. So I mean be a scientist in the most general possible way. Okay, so playing with squid is great. I encourage you all to do this. Go down to your local Asian market and you can find these things. And there's all kinds of great material on the web where you can look at how to dissect a squid. And please try it sometime. It's very exciting. Okay, so be a scientist. Another thing I will recommend to you is always engage the enemy. And I'll give you an example here. You all may have heard of this movie. Phil mentioned this movie that I got expelled from. This was a movie that came out a year and a half ago or so, and roughly. And this was a movie in which I am in it. Who's seen it? For shame. You didn't pay any money for this, did you? No. Okay. Yes. So here's this movie. I'm in it. I like to think I was the star of the movie, although I haven't actually seen it myself yet. And the thing is that they obtained interviews with us, people like me and Richard Dawkins, under false pretenses. They lied to us about what the movie was about. They got us to do this. And then we suddenly discovered, after the fact, after we'd signed a little contract that said they could do what they will with our interviews, we discovered after the fact that this was a creationist movie. It was being promoted by the intelligent design folks of the Discovery Institute and so forth. It was just awful, awful, awful stuff to discover. And here we are in acute embarrassment, because here we've contributed to the creationist literature, so-called. The question was then what to do, and there was a hot debate over the internet among us victims of this movie. And I will tell you that a number of the people who were suckered into this were making a very sensible argument. They said, this is a bad movie. It's really stupid, and it's obtained under false pretenses. It's completely dishonest. The thing to do with this kind of event is ignore it, and it will go away. If we draw attention to it, we're going to make money for the makers of Expelled. So they wanted to say, hush up, just let it die. And yes, that would have worked. We could have simply gone silent, and they would not have made as much money. They would have made some, because they had an audience, but it would not have. It would have died, withered, faded away fairly slowly. See those words up there? Always engage. This is me. I'm the hostile, aggressive one, the militant atheist. Militant meaning I write things. But anyway, I said, no, we're not going to do this. What we're going to do is we're going to charge in, and we are going to make this a cause célèbre. We're going to get out there, and we're going to announce this and ram it home, and I don't care if anyone else is on with me. I've got this really noisy blog, and I can make a stink, and I will. And I did. Those of you who read my blog at the time this was coming out, no, it got kind of boring at times, because bam, bam, bam. It was, here's this latest stupidity from Expelled. And I will freely confess that what I did was I made money for this movie. The movie did reasonably well for a documentary, but as you can tell from all the hands that were raised earlier in this room, who was watching it? I gave it a lot of attention, and all those godless atheists out there had to go see this train wreck. And they did, and the reviews were scathing. Lots of people saw it just to laugh at it and to make pointed remarks about how bad it was. So it was a victory, an intellectual victory. It was not a monetary victory for us. We actually made the money, as I freely admit. But at the same time, we did very well in exposing this bad, bad movie. The other thing is that the way we responded to this, you know, it wasn't us going to the theater and picketing it. You all remember this has happened in the past with, you know, you show some movie that offends religious sensibilities, and what happens? The churches turn out, they bring out the pickets, they say, don't see this movie, don't see this movie, don't see this movie. We were taking a very different approach, weren't we? We were saying, yeah, you can show this movie, we're going to come laugh at it. And that worked. That was very, very effective. We weren't getting angry in a vicious way, we were getting angry in a let's laugh at this movie sort of way. One of the most effective strategies I saw for dealing with this is this little clip I'm going to try and show you next. We'll see if the sound comes through. This was something done by Richard Dawkins. Let's hope this works. Yeah, we got sound coming through there.
I was viewed as an intellectual terrorist.
If you have questioned sex theory, that's it. Your career's over.
I have been told to shut up.
As a sex maniac, I'm pretty hostile to the rival stalk theory.
Just stand up and question sex theory. You'll find out how risky that is. There are people out there who want to keep science in a little box where it can't possibly touch storks. Stork theory. I mean, it's just fantasy, basically. Scientists are not allowed to even think thoughts that involve storks delivering babies.
We cannot accept to treat the stork theory as an alternative scientific theory.
I'm frightened by this, but I'm not going to let it stop me from investigating and from speaking about it.
Ultimate stalk theory. It's all very well to say that the stork delivers the baby, but who delivers the stork?
Now, that is pitch perfect. That's the kind of response we have to make to these people, is we have to make them objects of ridicule. This little clip that Josh Timonen of the Richard Dawkins Foundation put together with Richard Dawkins' obvious assistance was just perfect. This is how we feel about intelligent design. It's the same as the stork theory. It's a perfect analogy. The other thing you'll notice is like Jerome mentioned the other night, he kind of mocks the way they also edit and splice together anything that you've said into whatever they want. And they can do this sort of thing. They do it all the time. But by exposing them and by making fun of them this way, we made it well known all across the internet and all across the readership of many other news sites that picked up on this, and you know, New York Times picked up, all these others picked up on it. It became well known that this was a completely dishonest operation. The other thing is, you know, I mentioned earlier about the buses and how we should never overestimate how sensitive they are. The other thing we shouldn't do is underestimate how stupid they are. Now, in general, creationists are not stupid people, okay? That many of them are people with just simple, different ethical concerns and a lack of knowledge about certain issues. But the leadership, we can often say, are pretty darn stupid. And one beautiful example of this is this movie had this elaborate promotional campaign going on. And one of the things they wanted to do is they were inviting journalists to listen in on a press conference. We're going to announce all this wonderful stuff about it. and they handed out a phone number to various journalists, which happened to include bloggers like me, which, whoa, what a mistake. Anyway, they handed it out to me, and they said, call in at such and such a time, and we will tell you all the inside story of Expelled. Well, what happens is, you know, I call in early. I call in like 20 minutes early, and what it is you call this number and you get this one-way exchange where you can hear what's going on the other side, but you can't talk. So this is pretty standard creationist strategy: is shut up everybody who might criticize you, and so that you can get your word out there. And I tune in early and I'm listening, and they're having a conversation over there, wherever the press conference is occurring, and they said, you know, Ben Stein will be coming on soon. Has anyone given him the phone number for the two-way? And he said, oh, I'm not sure. What is that number? Yeah. And they actually gave that number right there. So I wrote it down, I hung up, I called that number, and got back on the phone and sat there quietly throughout their really ridiculous press conference where they were not expecting any input from the journalists who were listening in. And then near the end, I said, oh, one other point. And Ben Stein sounds shocked. Who is that? He said on the phone. And I said, this is P.Z. Myers. I'm one of the stars of the movie. And I have my own opinions on this movie, and I encourage anyone to give me a phone call, and I will give you my side of the story. And then I told them my phone number. And then of course I just simply hung up. But it was great, because then I go back to my hotel room and the phone starts ringing. So yeah, the New York Times calls, all these other places call right after this, and apparently Ben Stein was very upset with me. It's the kind of thing we have to do. Be assertive. Don't let them get away with this stuff. Okay? Don't be shy about speaking up, and you know, use the media. Get out there and take advantage of them. You know, like I said, I just made this brief announcement. I didn't try to disrupt or scream or set off air horns on the phone, which would be fun. It's just here's the facts, here's the story, here's what I want you to know, and here's how to contact me. So what you have to do is you be certain not to let the foolishness pass. And I drafted all you guys to do that this weekend. Thank you, my willing accomplices, my minions. This was the point of going to the Creation Museum, is don't just sit back and take it. Go there, find out for yourself, explore what they're saying, figure out what kinds of really goofy things they are promoting and how they're promoting it. All of you who went to the museum are now informed critics. You have authority. When you talk to your family, when you talk to your friends, and they ask about this wonderful museum in Kentucky, you can now say, oh, I was there, it was crap. Here's why. And you can be explaining everything. This is power. This is knowledge. This is a wonderful thing. I mean, there's all these things, like this is just a photograph I took of a random exhibit. I mean, look at this. This is absolutely absurd. What they're proposing is that primates have two lineages. There's one group over there that somehow gave rise to it, and you notice there's a little interruption there. 2348 BC, that's the flood. Lucy is sometime after the flood, not 3 million years ago. And then all these branches, she's not even on the same line, and there's us, we're special. We had one creation 6,000 years ago, and our lineage goes on uninterrupted there, no branching. This is completely contrary to all of the evidence. It's absurd nonsense. This is the kind of thing we have to oppose. Well, I want to mention just for a moment some critics of my approach. It's only fair. I'm not going to be fair to them, though. I'm going to mention a really stupid quote. There's been a little bit of yelling on the internet lately about Mooney and Kirschenbaum. They wrote this book called Unscientific America, which singles me out for a whole 2 chapters. Yeah. And this is what they say: the American scientific community gains nothing from the condescending rhetoric of the new atheists. That's me, I guess. And Richard Dawkins and much more. And neither does the stature of science in our culture. We should instead adopt a stance of respect towards those who would hold their faith dear, and a sense of humility based on the knowledge that although science can explain a great deal about the way our world functions, the question of God's existence lies outside its expertise. This is diplomacy, I guess. Right? Not the kind of diplomacy we talk about here, but this is a kind of craven diplomacy. I see the stuff about we're supposed to have a stance of respect towards those who hold their faith dear, humility based on knowledge, although science can explain a great deal about the way our world functions. The question of God's existence isn't determined. Then you go to the Creation Museum, and you read about where did Cain get his wife? Who knows the answer?
His sister.
His sister. This is a long apologetic for incest in the Bible, which concludes at the end, since God is the one who defined marriage in the first place, God's word is the only standard for defining proper marriage. People who do not accept the Bible as their absolute authority have no basis for condemning someone like Cain marrying his sister. Yes, biblical marriage. This is what we want. This whole thing, look at this, paragraph after paragraph, and it's just rhetoric, begging the question, saying, okay, well, this was okay back then, that yes, Cain could fuck his sister. This apparently is what we have to have the proper measure of respect for. And, my proper measure of respect is 0. Yes. It involves profanity and rude noises. So we go to this Creation Museum and we discover this stuff, this absurdity that's parading through the museum. Now, of course, I did not go into the museum and yell at anybody about this. Because like I told you, what's the proper way to respond to this stuff? It's what you guys were just doing. It's laughter. We've got to be amused. We've got to have a good time. We've got to put a face to atheism that isn't Spock, that isn't the glowering cerebral guy who's mean and cranky. I think this is a good face. Does she look angry? No, she's having a good time. This is pretty funny stuff. And it's making a mockery of this particular display at the museum. And by the way, we can make similar mockeries of all of the displays at the museum, and that's what we have to do, is let's keep on laughing at these guys. Now I want to show one last quote here, and it's a long one, so forgive me for this one, but there's really only one phrase that you really have to care about. I showed you Mooney and Kirschenbaum's view on this. I'm going to show you Darwin's view. Now this is Darwin not arguing for atheism. Darwin did not ever argue for atheism. So let's not make that mistake. Darwin was an agnostic, leaning towards atheism, who did not accept established religion, but he was also fairly circumspect in public about this. So what this is Darwin arguing against creationism. So like I said, long quote. But don't read the whole thing. What he is basically, I just want to make it clear, he's not arguing for atheism here. He's arguing for natural selection, for his model of how life progressed. And at the end there, he makes this really important statement, that whoever is led to believe that species are mutable, or we could say in our case, whoever is led to believe that there is no God, whatever thing you believe strongly, will do good service by conscientiously expressing his conviction. This is your job. That your job is to get out there and conscientiously express your conviction in all things, not just atheism, not just evolution, but in all of your beliefs. This is how we make progress, is by sharing these ideas. So just to summarize, here's what I'm telling you guys to do. So do good service by conscientiously expressing your conviction. Use passion, personality, and humor in your interactions with others in the promotion of those ideas. Stay true to science, and I mean science broadly defined. Evidence, material facts, critical thinking, that is science, and all of you execute that. And it's really the core of our godless values. And lastly, do something. Act. Don't just sit there and complain about things. When we went to the Creation Museum, we were making an act, and we were doing something. We have acquired new information, and we're going to act upon it. Okay.